small, overlooked town of Mora. Daniel Arizmendi was born in 1960 into a poor family living in a crowded neighborhood. Life in this area was fraught with hardships. Crime and poverty dominated everything. Daniel grew up in an environment of violence, with his father unemployed and his mother suffering from mental health issues. These circumstances shaped Daniel into a quick-tempered young man, struggling with trust issues. From an early age, his aggressive tendencies became evident, and he resorted to violence to resolve any conflict. Over time, Daniel developed an increasing desire for power and wealth, adopting the belief that money was the key to dominance. By 1990, Daniel had resolved to achieve his dream of wealth at any cost. One dark night in Mexico City, he spotted a young boy on his way to school. The child came from a wealthy family. In that moment, Daniel felt an urge to target him. He kidnapped the boy and held him in an isolated location, then sent a ransom note to the mother, demanding a large sum of money. Initially, the child's family did not take the threats seriously, but Daniel shocked them by sending a severed piece of the boy's ear. This gruesome act plunged them into terror, forcing them to pay the ransom. However, Daniel relished the control he had over them, and this only encouraged him to continue. Daniel became skilled at using the tactic of severing his victims' ears to terrorize them. He didn't just want to kidnap, he wanted to prove his power. He would contact the families before sending the severed ear, threatening to kill the victim if they didn't pay more money. The nickname the ear cutter became infamous around the city. With each crime, Daniel measured the fear and panic he caused. Over time, he realized that money was no longer his only goal. He craved power and psychological control over others. The severed ear became his horrifying signature. As time passed, Daniel felt that his small town had become too limiting for his ambitions. The crimes he had committed had drawn the attention of the police, but he had evaded capture due to his ability to disappear quickly. He decided to relocate to Mexico City, where the dense population and numerous opportunities allowed him to commit crimes without getting caught. He expanded his operations, kidnapping several children from wealthy families. He worked quickly and precisely, carefully selecting his victims to ensure that the ransoms he demanded would be substantial. Mexico City became the stage for his reign of terror, leaving the public in a state of fear. As Daniel continued his brutal practices, the number of his victims grew significantly. The rise in kidnappings became a major concern for Mexican society. With each new victim, Daniel instilled terror in wealthy families, as no one knew who would be next. The threats he made to the families became more vicious, and the severed ears were part of his horrific ritual that he would not hesitate to carry out. The name the ear cutter spread like wildfire, and people spoke of his crimes with a mix of fear and outrage. The police eventually realized that Daniel was not simply demanding ransoms. A disturbing pattern began to emerge in his crimes. Victims' bodies were found in remote locations, each bearing signs of ear mutilation. This led investigators to connect the crimes. Sometimes, Daniel would leave the severed ear as evidence of the crime, ensuring that the families knew there was little hope of survival. Fear began to escalate across the country, especially after the discovery of the first victim abandoned in a quiet neighborhood. Initially, the investigations were chaotic. There was difficulty determining whether the crimes were connected. However, as the incidents continued and more victims were found, the police decided to intensify their efforts. Investigators began focusing on the phone calls Daniel made to the families, demanding ransoms. Gradually, evidence began to pile up, offering investigators hope that they could catch the perpetrator soon. Daniel Arizmendi wasn't just an ordinary criminal. He was a master manipulator. He understood that fear was his most powerful weapon, so he would first send gruesome pictures of his victims' severed ears, then threaten the families with further torture if they didn't pay the ransom. In some cases, he would send the severed ear before even asking for the ransom, intensifying the pressure on the families. His strategies ensured the money would be paid, but he never stopped there. Every time a ransom was paid, he would start looking for a new victim. As the investigations intensified, the pressure on Daniel began to mount. On one occasion, he failed to complete a kidnapping because his car was spotted by surveillance cameras. He attempted to flee Mexico City, but luck was not on his side. Escape routes were closed off, and the police were getting closer than ever. This was the first time he felt that his capture was imminent, prompting him to make increasingly reckless decisions. The police began tracking Daniel's movements more closely. Investigators discovered that he was using multiple fake identities to stave off the radar. With ongoing investigations, they began piecing together the threads connecting Daniel to numerous crimes. The pressure on him increased, and with each step, he was drawing closer to capture. During this time, Daniel started feeling the consequences of his actions, yet he continued to try to escape by any means necessary. In 1993, after a series of meticulous investigations and cooperation between local and federal police, Daniel's hideout was identified. Authorities raided his hideout in a remote neighborhood, where they arrested him as he tried to flee. He had been constantly moving between cities to avoid capture, but he never expected that this raid would mark the end of his reign of terror. Once in custody, he became a symbol of fear around the world, and no one could believe that the ear cutter had finally been brought to justice. During the initial investigations, Daniel began to confess to the details of his crimes, explaining how he carefully selected his victims and used the brutal method of ear cutting as a form of pressure. He admitted that he enjoyed every moment of the kidnapping process, and each ear represented a symbol of his power. His confessions were shocking to the police, as they revealed the complexity of the criminal network he had built. This revelation meant that the case was far bigger than anyone had initially thought. After an extensive period of investigations, Daniel Arizmendi's trial began in 1994. There were numerous charges against him, including kidnapping, murder, and brutal torture. His defense tried to portray him as a victim of his circumstances, but the strong testimonies from the victims and the irrefutable evidence against him made his trial straightforward for the judiciary. It was proven that he was highly intelligent in executing his crimes. In 1996, Daniel Arizmendi received his final verdict. He was sentenced to life in prison. He could not escape this time, as his location was secured in a maximum security prison. In 2000, after years of trials and detention, the case of Daniel Arizmendi was closed. The horrific crimes that had terrorized Mexico came to an end, making him one of the most notorious criminals in the country's history. The events of those years left a grim legacy in Mexico City, and the chilling name, the ear cutter, echoed for years to come. Source of the true story: the case was uncovered in 1990 and concluded in 2000 with the closure of the case in Mexico, specifically in Coahuila.